Can $150 Amazon track saw really be worth it? Well, today we're gonna find out on Modern Builds. Hey y'all, my name's Mike Montgomery. Welcome to my shop. If you're new here, I just got done unboxing a recent late night Amazon purchase. It's this 6.5-inch track saw made by the company Win, and it sells on Amazon for right around $150. So first impressions on this saw have me really intrigued. The first thing I noticed is that the bed is made out of the same relatively low quality plastic as the rest of the body. Also, the rest of the body has basically no rubber or ergonomic grips. It's basically all made out of the same plastic, and if I had to compare it to a different brand, I would say it's very similar to the Drill Master brand at Harbor Freight. I've got one of their trim routers here, and you can see how the plastic is basically identical. And that's not a knock. I use this tool all the time, but I'm just giving some comparisons. And the last really unique characteristic that I want to point out before I get cutting is that this is actually a 6.5-inch track saw. I have not seen this before. I think every other saw on the market uses a 7.25-inch blade, but I really don't think that's going to be a big problem considering I want this for breaking down 3/4-inch plywood for 90% of my cuts. And that's why in this video, I'm going to be comparing this saw to a Ryobi circular saw. I think this is a better comparison than comparing this to the other track saws on the market. Plus, I haven't looked, but I'm sure there's already a couple of those videos already up. Now that we've done a quick rundown on the saw, let's move on to the tracks themselves. One of the things that they've done here is they've cut these to where when combined, it's a total of 100 inches long, which does not give much room considering a piece of plywood is 96 inches. Aside from that, I would assume Win is sourcing their tracks from the same factory as everybody else. The material is about the same thickness as every other track saw I've used, and all in all, it just looks the same. Basically, we're testing in this video whether Win cut too many corners or just the right amount for the price point. So I'll be doing some side-by-side testing between how long it takes and the quality of cuts between this 18-volt Ryobi circular saw and this 6.5-inch Win track saw from Amazon that'll cost you about $150. First, I switched over the Ryobi circular saw to a 60-tooth Diablo blade. That way I got the best cut. I do this every time I get a new saw. And then I tried to put the same blade on the track saw to realize that it has a different size arbor and that the blade cannot go into this saw. So instead, we're gonna be using the factory blade for both of these saws. Both of them are 24-tooth carbide teeth. So we'll keep that in consideration with cut quality, but at least it's the same blade. And just so we're all on the same page, I'm gonna be using 4 criteria to judge this saw. First is going to be build quality. Second is cut quality. Third, usability. And fourth, overall value. So without any further ado, let's get cutting. The first cut I need to make is to trim this rubber edge. That way it's zero clearance. I've got my fingers crossed that this track is in the right place. I definitely do not have very much wiggle room, but let's go for it. I started my plunge cut, and you can see here that I had to back up my saw a little bit past the edge of my track to get that corner cut square. And I had to come back and do a second cut on the opposite end of the track where one of the bearings on my saw lost contact. Okay, so first impression is I'm impressed, but this track just straight up needs to be a little bit longer. The plunge was a little bit difficult. I think you could see that. I'll instant replay it. And the end of the cut really wasn't that convenient either. So we'll see if this ends up being a big factor. I really think it might be. Okay, I gotta step in here. This saw is trash. I've never used it before, but I have to switch over to the 7.25 brushless one. The footage that I'm playing you shows how crappy it is. I recommend Ryobi all the time. This one is not brushless though. Maybe that's the case. Let's switch out real fast. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1, go. I've got 2 identical cuts to make for this first test, and I started by measuring and cutting along the length of this panel, ripping it to width. I got a little bit of a head start with the track saw, but you'll notice that I lost this lead by fumbling the track saw, positioning it onto the track on the wrong side. Ultimately, this cost me my lead, and the circular saw won this test by just about 10 seconds. Done. So I would say time was not a factor here. Test number 2 is going to be about cross cuts and miters. I've got to make 6 French cleats with the circular saw and the track saw, and we're going to see which one does it best and which one's most convenient.
3, 2, 1,
let's go. No spoilers, but time ended up not being a huge factor in test number 2 as well. It was pretty close. I started by setting my straight edge and my saw to 45 degrees, and you can see here that both saws finished their first cut in approximately the same amount of time. As I measured and cut, this became a little bit of a horse race going back and forth, but what it made really apparent was that it depended on how quickly I was able to measure and set the 45 degree or 90 degree angle on my saw. I've got my muscle memory down with a circular saw and straight edge, so I jumped into a little bit of an early lead. Plus, doing a little bit of math in my head doesn't slow me down either anymore. But once I got the hang of using the track saw, I was able to set it to 45 and 90 degrees a little bit more quickly and get my straight edge on and clamped down fast. In this second test, where I didn't fumble the track saw won by about 25 seconds, so I would say that it was a little bit quicker over 6 cuts. The convenience of cross-cutting with this track was apparent during test number 2, but we'll talk about this more later on. But before we move on, I'd like to give a big thanks to the sponsor of today's episode, Squarespace. If you need a website, an online store, or just a custom domain, Squarespace is your one-stop shop. And the best part is you need 0 website building experience. I'm serious, if you can upload files, move around images, and edit text blocks, you are well on your way to a one-of-a-kind site. Plus, there is no limits to the number of products you can sell using a Squarespace store. Squarespace's designer templates are designed to look great on desktop, tablet, and mobile no matter where customers find you. And if you follow the link down in my description, that's squarespace.com/modernbuilds, you can build out your entire Squarespace website before entering any of your credit card info. And then when it's time for your site to go live, make sure and use my code, ModernBuilds, for 10% off your first site, store, or domain. Big thank you, as always, to Squarespace and you all for watching. Now let's get back to this review. All right, so it's tomorrow for me after the ad read for you all, but I reviewed all the footage and it was really interesting. I do have one, and I only mean one, sticking point with this whole system, and it is the length of this track. Now, I knew that Win would be cutting corners kind of at all costs to get the price point as low as possible, so I knew the track would be short and have 0 wiggle room. But unfortunately, this track really needs to be at least an inch longer minimum. Now that doesn't make this unusable, but you really need to find and mark the sweet spot on your track. My recommendation is to shift your track so it's overhanging more on the in-feed side of your track. That way both bearings can make contact with the track when you make your plunge cut. And you can see in this clip where I had to back up about 1/4 of an inch where my bearing was floating, meaning that it wasn't making contact with the track. But I still got a good square cut, and unfortunately, on the outfeed side of the track, on the opposite side of the plywood, I also had to float that bearing about the same amount to get that corner cut cleanly too. So yeah, that's really frustrating because if this track was literally just an inch or 2 longer, both bearings on the bottom of this track would make constant contact with the track. And it's kind of ironic that a 96-inch straight edge works great with the circular saw because it's referencing the edge of the bed, which extends past the blade, whereas the bearings on the track saw are actually inset quite a bit. All right, let's wrap this up. So we are judging this track saw on 4 criteria, and the first is build quality. And I'm judging this with price and expectation in mind. So I've used some Harbor Freight tools, I've used affordable Amazon products before, and I've got to say, this completely meets expectations. The one unique thing that I mentioned is this plastic bed. Do I think it's going to be a problem? Absolutely if you drop it, but I don't think anybody plans on dropping their track saw. Everyone I know that has one really treats it nicely, so I'm going to consider that a non-factor. All of the knobs and buttons seem to work really well, even though they seem to be cheaper plastic than what the other brands are using. Still, not a big problem. So, out of 5 stars, I rank build quality 4.5. Obviously, you could make improvements, I don't know, at the same price point, but we've got to leave some room. That's why I'm not giving it a 5. And I should mention, the track literally reminds me of every other track I've used. I don't think that there's anything different other than the length. Which brings me on to criteria number 2, cut quality. Now, I really wanted to use one of these 60-tooth blades. It's what I always have on a circular saw. It's what's on the 7 1/4 saw that I use all the time. The arbor on this was too small though, so I kept the 24-tooth blade, and it worked really, really well. One of the big upsides about using a track saw is that you have a zero clearance buffer between your blade and the material. And that worked amazing on the left side of the blade. But on the right side of the blade, you can see exactly what a 24-tooth blade normally looks like when it's cross-cutting, and it's not that pretty, even though it did fine. So I definitely recommend changing the blade, but the upside of having zero clearance is awesome, so I'm gonna rate cut quality a 5. Couldn't get better. Our third credential is usability, and I've got to get a little bit critical here with when. Now, I don't recommend doing this. Everyone be safe. I took off the anti-kickback feature. That way I could reverse my cut like I mentioned I needed to do earlier. It also made putting the saw on the track way more convenient. I don't recommend doing this. Always keep your safety features on. And now that I've satisfied the safety police, we can talk about the track. Now, I don't want to be dramatic, but how silly or just dumb was it that they made this track literally just 1 or 2 inches too short to never be a problem? It would be 5 stars if this track was 102 inches long. But I'm sure that there was some sort of shipping or packing requirements that they were able to get better rates on to have these shorter tracks. I've noticed online that as track saws get cheaper, the tracks tend to be a little bit shorter outside of Kreg. Connecting and disconnecting the tracks is really easy. They use the same mechanisms as every other brand, but as a super serious YouTube reviewer, kind of, I could not just plainly recommend this saw with this track. If you are somebody that doesn't mind doing exactly what I did, finding that sweet spot on their track and having to float the bearings just a tiny bit, then you are totally good and you will save a ton of money. But if I were to recommend this track to anybody that was anger prone or just got frustrated sometimes while they were building, I think I would be doing a bad job. But if you are a cool, calm, and collected person, maybe this is the perfect solution for you. And before I give my rating, I have a couple other brands of tracks in the mail that I ordered from Amazon, and I'll be sure to leave links to the ones that work, if any do, down in the description. So with all things considered, my overall usability rating for this Win track saw combo kit is 2 out of 5. Sorry, it is what it is. And finally, category 4 is overall value, and I'm taking the small track problem out of the equation since it's already factored into the previous category. I'm really not comparing this to the $900, $800 track saws on the market. And for being just a little bit more expensive than a comparable circular saw, I would say this is a really good value. I'm gonna go ahead and rate it at 4 out of 5. And after punching the numbers, that gives us an overall score of 3.875 out of 5 stars. So I guess that would be 3 7/8 stars. Congratulations, Win. And if anyone's curious whether this gets the Mike stamp of approval, the thumbs up or thumbs down, it really is in the middle. If you're somebody that thinks they will get frustrated with the track, you definitely will. It's a thumbs down. But if you're somebody that really doesn't think it'll be a bother and the price savings is absolutely worth it, I think it's a thumbs up. You'll probably see it from me from time to time, but it will not be a regular part of my arsenal. More often than not, I'm using a straight edge and a circular saw. That way it's more relatable to what you all are doing anyways. So thanks again for watching. I'm relying on y'all down in the comments. If any other brand tracks work, please let us know. If there is a compatible 102, 104, or longer inch track, this thing is a 1000% thumbs up. Let me know if this video could lead to a series. Who knows, I might become YouTube's #1 tool reviewer guy. Realistically, I just feel like if you're used to watching my videos, then you might trust my opinion. So hopefully this video was helpful. If you're new here, make sure and click like, subscribe, and the notification bell, and we will see you next time on Modern Builds. Bye. Outro update. So y'all confirmed that the 110-inch Powertech track works with the Win saw. That takes it from $170 to a total of $250, which is exactly half the price of the Kreg ACS track saw. I'm not gonna make the choice for you. Bye.